I wasn't expecting Backlash 2025 to be good, but somehow it still managed to underdeliver. The first two matches had something. Then it turned into an episode of Raw. And I'm not even trying to be dramatic with that. It wasn't some shocking downfall or anything. It was just the exact kind of collapse that we expect WWE to have in perfect art form. You get a couple of matches that look like that they cared. Then it's back to the overbooking, run-ins, dumb distractions, and everything that makes their weekly shows feel endless. The sad part is, those first two matches weren't just good. They actually kind of have a flow and effort that made you think that they might try to keep that level all night. But nah, as soon as the interference started, it all fell apart. And by the time we got to Cena Orton, this thing was just dragging itself to the finish line. But before all that nonsense kicked in, the US title match with Jacob Fatu, Drew McIntyre, Damian Priest, and LA Knight actually gave this thing a pulse. I'ma keep it real with y'all. This was actually fun. I'm not saying it was the match of the year or anything, but for an opener, it gave the show some real momentum. They all let all four guys go full throttle right away. Big brawls, wild reversals, and a pace that didn't feel like it was waiting for something else. LA Knight looked more alive than he has in months, and Priest felt sharp too, throwing in these quick burst combos, old school lariats, even hitting a springboard move that actually landed. What really helped this one click was that everyone had standout stretches. Knight chaining together a neck breaker, a back breaker, and a DDT with that double elbow. That had the crowd going. Then you got Fatu doing a swanton, a hip attack, a suicide dive, and then another swanton, all in one stretch. That whole run was the highlight reel. And Priest, he was all over the place with the step-up kicks and flatliners, hitting dudes with reverse spin kicks 1 second and then launching off the stairs the next. Even Drew felt focused, spine busters, claymores, and throwing guys overhead like it was nothing. It all felt chaotic, but in a way that worked. The finish though was classic WWE stuff, but I'll admit, this at least worked. You had Solo pulling Fatu out of an elbow drop, then the debuting Jeff Cobb popping up to align with Solo, and Fatu was just looking as confused as the rest of us. But after all that, Fatu hits a hip attack and a moonsault to retain the US title. It wasn't clean, but it didn't need to be. This was about momentum and action. This was easily the best match of the night. This gets a solid 3.5 stars. And for a second, I really thought this show might actually have something. Silly me. And then the Women's Intercontinental title match with Becky Lynch versus Lyra also hit. And honestly, it kept the same momentum going. Lyra and Becky didn't just show up here. They made it feel like something that you might want to go ahead and watch. This one was another one where I was like, alright, maybe this show might not suck after all. Lyra and Becky came out with some real intention. Not just moves, but actual rhythm. Lyra's control early on was pretty smooth. That surfboard stretch, the Northern Lights with the bridge, even her gut wrench stuff. She wasn't just hanging with Becky. At times it felt like she was leading the way. Now Becky tried to slow it down with some rougher spots, but even then, Lyra wasn't really rattled with this. And that running drop kick through the ropes, clean. She landed it like she belonged in there. Now Becky leaned into her heel tendencies here, and it added a nice wrinkle to it. She mocked Lyra's fiance in the crowd, threw some ugly slaps, and even went for the exposed turnbuckle later on in the match. It gave the whole thing more bite. Lyra's combos kept shining though. That muscle buster variation, the moonsault, even the delayed superplex. She wasn't just holding her own. She was going toe to toe in the big spots. And they didn't shy away from the striking either. You had boo yay chants, reversals into submissions, and false finishes stacked everywhere. Now it almost went too far with the kickouts, but the story they were trying to tell did make sense. They wanted this to feel like Lyra truly earned the win. Now the final stretch was a little messy, but in that emotional wrestling kind of way. Becky tried every trick in the book. Chair use, exposed turnbuckle, you name it. And Lyra just kept slipping out. eventually rolling her up again and again till she finally put her away. This gets 3.5 stars easily. Maybe even a touch higher if they cut some near falls here and there. And then of course, Becky attacks her right after the match because WWE can't just let stuff breathe. Still, it worked. This was a really good title defense. And for a second, just for a second, Backlash 2025 looked like it might have a backbone. But of course, all that pacing and energy had to come to a halt. Because next, we get Cena and Orton for the WWE title doing exactly what you think Cena and Orton in 2025 would do. Look, I really had no real excitement going into this. It's John Cena and Randy Orton in 2025. Not at WrestleMania and not Cena's last match. This was at Backlash. We've seen this movie before, and the weird part is they kind of knew it too. This match didn't feel like a real main event. It felt like a segment that kept stretching itself out. Now granted, it's definitely way better than the Cody match, but that's not saying a whole lot. They traded pokes to the eye, dueling sleeper holds, a shoulder tackle here, a draping TDT there. It was like they were just checking boxes, not really telling a true story. The real tension came from the crowd wanting something to care about. Now, it wasn't bad, it was just there. Cena hit the 5 moves, Orton hit the 5 moves. Then they hit them all again with some near falls and roll throughs tossed in. There was one cool reversal with Orton countering a tackle into an RKO. That got a pop. But then came the WWE playbook. Ref bumps, belt shots, run-ins, table spots, you name it. It happened. And none of it made the match better. If anything, it exposed how much they were relying on nostalgia and noise to stretch this thing out. The ending was just layers of interference and smoke screens until Cena hit a low blow and a belt shot of all things again to retain the belt. Like, what are we doing here? R-Truth coming out there to stop a punt? Aldis getting RKO? Another ref goes down? Another attitude adjustment? It was like someone kept smashing the booking button backstage just to see what would happen. This gets 2.5 stars. Not unwatchable, just one of those WWE style finishes where nothing feels earned. But everyone goes home thinking it was dramatic. We've seen this too many times. Now look, I get what this next one was trying to be, but this felt like it belonged on a random Raw in the middle of July. Pat McAfee versus Gunther. A spectacle, sure, but with no reason to be on this show. Now this is one of those matches where you just shrug and say, yeah, this didn't need to be here. Gunther tossing the punter around, the punter doing his usually fired up underdog thing, and the crowd's into it because, well, it's the punter, but there's no real weight to any of it. The punter hits a few kicks, Gunther chops the soul out of him, rinse and repeat. It didn't feel like a pay-per-view match, more like something they threw together to pop Cole on commentary and give the live crowd a novelty moment. Now they did try to build a little momentum, I'll give them that. The punter had a flurry of offense with some penalty kicks and a big slap that landed clean. Now Gunther, of course, returned fire with suplexes and brutal chops, and then the match slowed down for a minute with a Boston Crab that gave Cole his cue to go full cheerleader mode. And then Gunther dragged him into the ring to tease a power bomb. That actually gave us the most memorable part of the match. Cole holding Gunther's foot for a near fall. Now I can't front, that almost got me. Funny? Yes. Pay-per-view worthy? Not even close. This was a Raw angle that somehow slipped onto pay-per-view. Gunther ends it with a sleeper, which honestly fits the energy. But to think the punter lasted longer than regular WWE guys in the ring with Gunther, it's just silly to me. This gets 2.5 stars for effort, but this had no business being on the show. Even the post-match respect moment felt like WWE patting itself on the back for giving us a sportsman-like finish here. And really that just sums it up. This wasn't awful, it was just pointless. And just when you think it can't feel more like filler, Dominic Mysterio versus Penta for the Intercontinental title. A match that started with potential, then gets steamrolled by every WWE bad habit in the book. This one was a mess. It started off like it might be something. Penta had energy. Dom actually looked solid here for once. And the crowd gave them just enough to work with it. They traded tiaras, backbreakers, had a couple of clean exchanges. And for a second you're thinking, okay, let's see where this goes. But nah. The second the Judgment Day showed up, it turned into one of those matches that gets hijacked by WWE nonsense before it ever finds a real groove. Now, to their credit, there were still a few spots that stood out. Dom hit a suicide dive into a DDT that did look sharp, and Penta had a nice run with that destroyer on the apron. He also had that tope con hilo on Judgment Day to the outside. But that was it. The moment the ref tossed everyone out, Grande Americano comes out and headbutts Penta with a loaded mask. And that's all she wrote. Frog splash, 1, 2, 3. Not because the match built to it. Not because it made sense. Just because WWE wanted the result. And the match had to get out of the way. There's nothing worse than a match that starts okay and gets dragged down by its own booking. This gets 2.5 stars. You could have pulled this straight from a random Raw, swapped in a different finish, and nothing about it would change. The work was passable, the interference was tired, and the outcome felt meaningless. Just another title defense where the belt feels like background noise. This show had 2 good matches, and then it fell straight off a cliff. It didn't nosedive because of bad wrestling. It collapsed under the same tired habits that have been haunting WWE pay-per-views for years. Run-ins, overbooking, comedy spots that don't land, and booking decisions that feel like they're happening in a vacuum. This gets a 6.75 out of 10. The opener in the women's title match gave this thing a chance, but WWE looked at that momentum and decided to raw it to death. You had 2 of your bigger stars phoning it in for the most part, titles that felt like props, and matches that belonged on Monday night. This wasn't a disaster, but it definitely wasn't worth your time. At the end of the day, this is what happens when WWE books like it doesn't care if you remember the show tomorrow. They had 2 matches that was going somewhere, and instead of building on them, they drowned the rest of the show in noise. That's the legacy of this pay-per-view. Not the belts, not the moments, just filler with a fancy name. You can skip it. You won't miss a thing.